So welcome back to Careers in Discovery. This week I am joined by Jen Fortune, Chief Operating Officer of Precede Biosciences. Welcome, Jen.
Good morning, or I guess good afternoon for you. It's very nice to be talking.
It's fantastic. I suppose a great place to start is to talk a little bit about Precede and your role at the moment. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Absolutely. It's a topic I like talking about. So Precede Biosciences is a liquid biopsy company that's focused on the epigenome. We call it comprehensive epigenomic profiling, a nice short quippy name. But what we're really doing is we're looking at epigenomics to elucidate the transcriptional activation status of individual genes and pathways that are druggable. A lot of
Okay.
words to say, we're really trying to be able to understand at any given time in a patient what genes are on and which genes are off and how they're functioning so you can understand the biology of the cell.
Yeah.
And we do this because the information and insights that we can generate with this platform can inform therapeutic decisions in the R&D context with biopharma partners that are developing therapeutics, and
Yeah.
hopefully very soon in clinical decision making with physicians as well.
Fantastic. And from what I know about liquid biopsy, and one of the real benefits is the minimally invasive. The other treatments, the other ways to get the data that you're looking for, it's not so great for patients.
Yeah, I mean, today, actual physical biopsies allow you some of the resolution that we're talking about, but you just can't always get biopsies in patients, and you certainly can't follow a patient's trajectory over time. The
Yeah.
probability that you have more than one biopsy in a given patient over time is really low. And so being
Yeah.
able to do it in a minimally invasive way in the blood allows you to actually get information that informs precision medicine. We like to think about precision medicine, and of course, this is, a company
This is
has
where
their way
you
of
come to life. Yeah.
but genomics is one horizon of being
Yeah.
able to get precision medicine. But genomics tells you, I like think of it as like the hardware of the cell. It tells you the facts. It doesn't tell you what software is being used, right? It doesn't tell you what's on and
Yeah.
off.
Yeah.
Um, Epigenomics gives you that insight, and you can only do that today with biopsies. The genomic liquid biopsy doesn't allow you to do that. So this is really taking it to the next level to
Yeah.
enable precision medicine to achieve the potential that we all know it has. I promise no
Fantastic
more marketing,
and
but that's kind of
fascinating.
the messaging that's
Yeah.
like, I don't know, it's what gets me excited.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell me a little bit about your role as a chief of operating officer. How do you spend your time?
That's a great question. Like most chief operating officer roles, it's kind of a catch-all for anything and everything that needs to get started, that doesn't have a home in an early stage company, especially an early stage, right? In a
Yeah.
larger company, it's usually a very defined role around manufacturing and other things like that. But in a, I don't know, 30 to 40 person company, um, it's a big catch-all. So I spend, obviously within my remit, I have all of the corporate support functions. So
Yeah.
when you think about legal, HR, finance, things like that. Um, and then we have a team that does product development on the assay and the platform. We have a scientific team that leads the scientific strategy and the building of the tests.
Yeah.
Um, but then, we have a clinical lab that's being built that is my responsibility. And also, ways of working in an organization, how we are productive, how we prioritize and project manage everything we're doing. Um, how we fix anything that pops up that's unexpected, and things
Yeah.
like early regulatory strategy, early quality, those types of things until we build out a full-scale organization fall within my remit as well.
Yeah. So very much the person and the team who gets everything moving, keeps everyone working to the same goal and the same mission and making it happen.
Yeah, I mean, lots of teaming, to be clear, with lots of folks that are my peers here to make this happen. But
Yeah.
I think of it personally as my accountability to make sure that that's all humming along smoothly, so that we're all
Yeah.
charging in the same direction and have visibility and transparency into what we need to get our job done effectively and efficiently.
Lovely. I'm really interested, always really interested to hear how people make the decision that science is for them, particularly within drug discovery.
I will say I am not a planner, which is really funny, and everyone who knows me will laugh at that comment because I'm a very type A person. And so to think that I'm not a planner is actually really difficult, but I'm not when it comes to career. I
Okay.
sort of just follow what's interesting to me at the time,
Yeah.
and what fits with my life, because I also have a young family at home. And so it's always been this balance. Um, and I've always liked science and technology. So, like the STEM or STEAM, whichever one is appropriately used in today's day, has always just been the thing that got me excited and the place where my face lights up. And
Yep.
so, I pursued that, and I actually thought I was going to go into medicine,
Okay.
like medical medicine, right? That was my
Yep.
first intent. I love biology and I love science and math. And so that was the logical path. But in college, I spent some time exploring working in a hospital with residents to sort of feel what it's like to be a doctor. And I was
Yeah.
super excited about it. But I realized the things I got most excited about were when patients came in and they hadn't responded the way they were supposed to, or when they
Okay.
came in with something that nobody understood. And I thought it's probably a terrible career choice to go into a field where you're hoping every day for things that are wrong, and maybe that shouldn't be what I do. And maybe I should work on understanding the biology and the stuff in the science. And so that's what sent me to grad school in chemistry as
Yep.
opposed to med school, which was my
Yep.
original plan if I had a plan. And then from there, obviously, the things I like are the application of science to medicine, because
Yep.
I wanted to be a doctor. And so,
Yeah.
pharmaceutical industry was the obvious place. And I sort of um, went down that path and have loved every minute of it. The mission base of what we do is just
Yeah.
so wonderful, that it kind of stuck, and I can't imagine doing anything else.
And that problem solving element that drives you, that sounds really formative through your career choices.
Yeah, I mean, I think, when I left, I went to grad school, didn't know exactly what I was going to do. It is not a planner thing. I just sort of liked science. Let's go to grad school. It doesn't actually in the US, it didn't cost any money to go. And so I was like, great,
Yeah.
I'll learn what I want to do. Um, I knew a couple of years in I wasn't going to be an academic researcher. That was pretty clear to me. But I also wasn't jazzed about the idea of going into a biopharma company and working at the bench as a scientist. It
Okay.
just didn't call to me. The pace of science is really slow, and I'm
Yeah.
just not that way. To your point on like this problem solving in the minutia on a really slow time scale also didn't quite do it for me. And so that's why I actually transitioned into consulting as a way to learn the business side of what we do in medicine, and thought it was just, something I can do with a PhD that could be interesting, and I'd figure it out after that, and stayed way longer than I thought I would, because I just got to see so many creative, challenging problems all the time and just constantly learn. And so this like constant growth and constant new challenges and complicated questions that aren't easy to solve has sort of driven all of my choices
Yep.
from that point on.
Yeah. So from doing your PhD, took the slightly unusual step to go straight into consulting in the world of business and strategy. What skill set was important for you when you were moving across into consulting?
The curiosity and just the grit to want to always get to an answer and to
Yeah.
want it to be the right answer, not, 100%. In consulting, you always talk about 80/20. Learning how
Yeah.
to do that was a new skill for me. I think that's foundational, but it turns out the other one is you have to actually work really well with people. And that
Yes.
wasn't something I had honed particularly well in a PhD program. You don't get rewarded for working well with people. In fact, competition is more the norm in most
Yeah.
research programs, at least
Yeah.
in my world. Um, and so that was fun. Fortunately, I like people and genuinely care about people, which helped. But I had to learn the skill sets. I'm a very direct person, and I just say what needs to be said, and I expect people will do the same to me. And when I
Yeah.
treat people the way I like to be treated, it turns out most of them don't like to be treated that way, and I had to learn that very quickly. But I had some good mentors who gave me
I
some
was going
really.
to ask, did you have some mentorship at that point? Because that's quite a turning and quite speed of upskill.
It didn't happen as fast as I wanted it to, for full transparency. And I learned coping mechanisms instead for until I got
Yeah.
there. But yeah, I had my first project in consulting. I had a partner ask me, we might have been on the project about a month, maybe a month and a half. So I'm, 6 weeks into my first real job as
Wow.
a almost 30-year-old individual because I was in school for so long. Um, and she invited me to lunch, and I was like, oh, look at this. There's this partner that wants to take me to lunch. This is amazing. I'm doing great things. And she nicely sat me down and said, Jen, I think you're fantastic. And I think you do wonderful things. And she's like, but you piss people off. And I was like, well, that's very candid. Thank you. But then she, of course, was very great with like, look, this isn't an atypical thing for someone that comes from a PhD, and that's okay. But it's something you need to work on. And then she gave me really tactical tools on how to do it. And so it was really formative in that I needed to hear that, and if I hadn't
Yeah.
heard that, probably wouldn't have been successful in consulting.
Yeah.
And also, it was formative in that it was someone being really direct, um, but in a constructive coaching way
Yeah.
as opposed to a feedback way,
Yeah.
which I really appreciated, right? Hearing the message, if she had stopped at the message, would have been really tough, but she didn't
Yeah.
stop at the message. She gave the context and then she gave coaching, and all of a
Yeah.
sudden it changed how I heard it. And so that was really formative in how I developed as a human being and as
And
a
really
mentor.
valuable. Yeah.
Yeah.
Have
Yeah, it
you
wasn't a
had
story I grew up, but
have you had the opportunity throughout your career to do any mentoring?
I have actually.
Yeah.
I will say one of the things that I am most excited about in every role that I'm in is the opportunity to coach and develop others. And so obviously when you lead a team, you have the opportunity to do that in a team setting. But it
Yeah.
turns out it comes up a lot informally as well. So
Yeah.
when I was at BCG, they had this role that they called a class dean. And it was basically a new cohort of PhD students because there's a couple in every consulting. They had to expand outside of the MBA ranks to meet the business needs. But what we found in consulting is that they either like sink or swim or like sail.
Yeah.
I don't know the exact expression, but either they do phenomenally well or they really struggle. And we found that putting a person that they feel like is their person, who's not their
Hmm.
boss and doesn't have any responsibility for feedback or promotions or anything else, was really valuable. And so I was the class dean for a cohort that was 7 women and 1 man that year of PhD students, which was
Wow,
amazing. And
that's incredible diversity.
it was amazing for that group. I mean, I think the class was still barely 50-50, but the PhD cohort in that office was amazing. And actually, they're some of my closest friends today, even though
Oh,
they were like
that's a
4 or 5 years
lovely story.
behind me. And they still call for like anytime they're thinking about career advice, they still call and they'll just say like, "What would Jen do?" And I laugh and I smile because it's hysterical. But they like that my style is very um, direct and driving, and I'm not really afraid to like take big leaps and think
Yeah.
about things differently and ask difficult questions and make them really think about things. So that's been really, I don't know, I love that. It makes you feel
Yeah.
so good. You can actually like be a good coach to someone.
Yeah. Fantastic. So then if we go on to the next step, after BCG, you moved to EMD Serono. Must have BCG is a big company, EMD Serono is another organization, but coming from very different angles.
Hmm. Yeah, I had said in consulting, I wasn't going, I was going to do startup. I was never going to go into a big company. Um, but at that time, I had a 1-year-old, a 2-year-old, and I was planning to get pregnant with my third.
Wow.
And I said, um, I don't think I can do startup right now. Like
Yeah.
I can't do consulting anymore. I need a different change. Um, and I want to be in a company and be responsible for actually driving and getting stuff done. But I
Mm,
don't think I can do startup. And I live very close to EMB Serrano, it turns out. And I had done some consulting work with them. And there was an individual there whose name was Rehan Verji, which will sound very familiar because he's also the CEO of Precede Biosciences,
mhm,
um, who had just stepped into a role leading the US business and the global commercial business. And I had
okay.
done my last project with them on a launch readiness assessment for one of the lead products that was going to be launching in the US business. And when I said I was leaving, he reached out about a role supporting him to drive the launches in the US market over the next couple of years. And I said, I mean, that sounds really cool. I can't like everybody wants to launch products in pharma, right? If you've done any work in commercial, that's what you want to do.
Yep.
Um, and so, and I knew him, and he is a brilliant person who is really driven and sets an exceptionally high bar. And so I knew I would just learn a ton in addition to having real impact at the beginning. And so that's how I ended up at EMB Serrano, which was
Wow.
a really great transition. Although I also had, that learning I talked about going from PhD to consulting. It
Yep.
turns out that there's similar learning going from consulting to in a company because you're
Yeah.
not an advisor and you don't get to walk away.
Yeah.
So when you do things that push people harder than they want to be pushed to get them to do stuff on timelines that the project sponsor is asking you to do, you don't have to live with that because you walk away at the end.
Yeah.
In an organization, when you do the same thing, you have to figure out how to manage that after the fact. Whereas
Nowhere to hide.
yeah, there was a bit more learning on that, which was again really, really great. But
Yeah.
something I hadn't expected quite as strongly. But it was a really fun transition.
And I suppose the natural next step would be to talk about how you ended up with Precede, but now I know a little bit more about why you joined EMD, I can kind of guess the answer here.
Yeah, I when I left DMD, we had launched a couple products, and there wasn't a ton of products in the queue, and I really had that itch to do startup, and so I
Yeah.
went to Flagship, um, and spent a couple years there with Jeff von Maltzen, who's a terrific innovator and entrepreneur. But in the background, Rahan had never gone very far away, and he was
Yeah.
building Precede Biosciences behind the scenes. And so about a year before I left Flagship, he had started asking me a little bit about, would you have interest in coming over to be the chief operating officer here? And um, I wasn't at the beginning, right? I was learning a ton and really enjoying the Flagship world, but there came a really natural transition point to either take on
Yeah.
another project at Flagship or transition. And one of the mantras I've had is I love following amazing people, and Jeff von
Yeah.
Maltzen is amazing. Rahan is amazing. And so it was two great choices. And ultimately, what I prioritized was Flagship is super bold, creative exploration of really early stage science, which is what I thought I wanted. And I loved learning it. It turns out I'm not built for that early of science.
Okay.
It's not
Yeah.
where I add the most value. I add the most value when you're thinking about the strategy and the phasing and the timing and
Yeah.
early stage
Once
when you're
that
doing
pace is a bit quicker.
Um, it's not even the pace, it's just you're so far away from anything except proving science in the
Yeah.
first
Yeah.
3 or 4 years of a startup therapeutic company. A
Yeah.
startup diagnostic company is revenue generating
Yeah.
in like the early, while you're building things, right? And so it's
Yeah.
like a fundamentally different place, and it's
Yeah.
just a better fit with how I'm built as a person.
Yeah. Okay. So if we look back at your career, what have been the key learns, the takeaways?
Um, I think one of the biggest ones for me has been, and this may not work for everyone. I've learned a lot that I am very different than a lot of people, and what I do is not always the best for everyone else. Um, but a couple of the things that stick out for me personally, um, finding great people and great
Hmm.
teams over great content has been a
Okay.
defining feature of what I've done.
Yeah.
I'm agnostic. Like, yes, there's lots of things I could be interested in. Is it immunology? Is it oncology? I don't predefine those,
Yeah.
but doing things that are challenging and difficult with amazing people that I like working
Yeah.
with and who work the same way that I work, um,
Yeah.
has been really important to my satisfaction and happiness and also my success. Because, if how did I land where I landed today at Precede Biosciences? Would a different CEO of this company who hadn't worked with me and hadn't known me
Yeah.
have said Jen is the obvious choice for this? I don't know. Maybe, but I'm not positive. And so when you find
Yeah.
great people, they sort of help you pull you along in various ways that enable and open doors. And this same thing, coming from MIT and having an advisor who opened doors for me,
Yeah.
BCG and partners who connected me to Rahan about a role. Like it's been a defining feature of how I end up where I end up.
Yeah.
So that's one of them. Um, I think the other one for me has been ways of working. I have
Hmm.
very direct person. When I got feedback that that wasn't landing well, I sort of, take the pendulum and shift it to the opposite side.
Yeah.
And that was a complete failure in every regard. And
Okay.
so one of the things I learned is you not that you can't change how you function as a being, but it's hard to change who you are as a person, in my
Yeah.
experience. And so I've learned to work with who I am and find ways to be successful being who I am.
Yeah.
And so, if I'm really direct, I'll preface things that I say to make sure that people have the context and that it lands the way I want it to land.
Yeah.
I'll have, I build relationships one on one so that I have more rapport with people such that if I give messages that are challenging, they land the way they're intended, as constructive to improve as opposed to critical
Yeah.
to challenge or to make someone feel bad. That's not the intent. And so I've sort of learned these mechanisms, but it's all being very true to how I am. And it's just a much happier way to live. And it turns out that it still works, right? As long as you're genuinely a good person and you genuinely
Yes.
care about people, it
Yeah.
works.
Yeah. Absolutely. And something that we haven't touched on yet, but I know that you're really interested in, is diversity in life sciences. What are your thoughts on that landscape at the moment? What do you think needs to be done to improve?
Oh, it's such a difficult question with as a woman who is also a parent and has young children and have made
Yeah.
decisions that balance things as opposed to advancement. Um,
Yeah.
I understand at an individual level why there may be differences in sort of equality at various
Hmm.
levels because of choices that people choose to make. And men can choose to make the exact same choices, but I know as an individual woman, I have, and my husband has not made the same choices, right? In terms
Yeah.
of how he about what he was doing. And so that's individual choices, individual people. But I think the other thing is that there is differences, right? Like there are certainly, um, I observe it in many worlds where you see people being treated differently, or you
Yeah.
see their style, and it's not usually in my experience, there are exceptions to this, of course. It's not overt. It's not someone saying, I think you're a woman and I don't think you're capable. It's not
Yeah.
that. It's they value behaviors that may
Yeah.
not be as common among women as they are among men, or they tolerate behaviors in individuals, men and women, that prevent many women from flourishing.
Yeah.
So somebody constantly jumping in and speaking over someone, right? Like so one of the things I have found is that, and I've been involved in a lot of initiatives. So I led women in chemistry at MIT when I was there. I was the node for women in leadership at BCG when I was there. This is just something I've been very involved in, and I also helped lead the women's group at EMD.
So from
And
very
so,
early in your career. Yeah.
yeah, it's just been, and it's interesting because we did this assessment at BCG. It was BCG wanted to understand differences between men and women.
Yep.
And the goal was to retain more women. That was the objective, to understand what drove women to voluntarily attrit from the organization. And it was very research based because BCG is very data driven.
Yep.
And it was this wonderful summary. And at the end of it, they
Mm.
basically show two bell curves. And they show that there are fundamental differences in the wants and needs of men and women. This is scientific research done by real scientists that
Yep.
BCG, emphasized and played back. But it's a bell curve, right? They overlap meaningfully. And it doesn't mean that every man or every woman falls squarely in one or the other, but there are, the
A
bell curves don't
trend.
overlap. It looks like an M. There's different peaks.
Yeah.
Um, and I walked away from it saying, "Oh, I'm a man," right? Like that was my well, very squarely. The tail that falls on the male dominated side was
Yeah.
where I landed. So I found it really interesting that I kept finding myself in these women in leadership roles. And it's one of the foundational things, right? Like I think that there are men and women that need to do more in every organization
Yeah.
to get the best out of everyone. And I say women, but there's also men who don't conform to typical standards that we don't get the most out of. And so when
Yeah.
I think of diversity, it's not gender, it's not race, it's who are the people on your team and how are you creating the environment to get the most out of them and
Yeah.
and really benefit from the diverse perspectives and experiences that they have and bring to the table. And that to me is what diversity is. And I think there's so much space for us to have more conversations and to have active conversations about individuals and about what we're doing and how we get the most out of people that don't have to center on ethnicity or gender, but just talk
Yeah.
about who are your people and how do you get the most out of them.
Yeah. What have you put in place with at Precede to be able for that to happen within the organisation?
Not enough formally yet, I'll be quite
Okay.
honest.
Yeah.
Company as small as we are,
Yeah.
there's a lot more informal, but I have been having conversations lately with folks about um, setting up, and again, I do it based on gender just because that's easy to do, but
Hmm.
a sort of like women's meeting once a month to just
Yeah.
hear what people are saying. But actually, I take that back. We did actually implement something recently that will help. We implemented a culture committee.
Okay.
And so, some of that is like the social side of culture in an organization,
Yeah.
but the other side of it is ways of working and how we think about what's working and what's not working. And as part of that, we're still defining the focus areas to kick off in 2025. But,
Yeah.
one of the things I want to capture there is, are we getting the most out of our team, and are we hearing all the voices? And that we'll start to get there a little bit. It won't be perfect, but it's a good step for a 30 to 40 person company.
Yeah, absolutely. And it enables you to keep the vision and the mission real for the journey that you're on.
Exactly.
What piece of advice would you give to scientists or people finishing their PhD? If you were to give it to your younger self or to a scientist early in their career, what piece of advice would you give?
I'm just thinking. There's so many things.
You're allowed to think. Yeah.
I I don't know that coming out of my PhD, I recognized how fluid career paths are. And I've heard, I've done a lot in HR in the last 5 years in the
Yeah.
operating role. And people call them like career ladders, but I've also heard the term like career matrix, which I think is a much more accurate description of what a career really looks like.
Yeah.
If you are constantly focused on moving up, for some people, moving up as fast as they possibly can and getting as senior as they possibly can as quickly as they can is their priority. And that's great. And there's ways to do that.
Hmm.
For other people, what they really want is to feel fulfilled in what they're doing. And that may not always be taking the fastest, most accelerated path forward. Or they may have life decisions that mean that those roles would be challenging for them and not be appropriate balanced. And I've
Yeah.
talked to so many people thinking about their career path coming from a PhD through, various, usually healthcare world. And often it's like, yes, but, and they're comparing themselves to others.
Mm.
And it's just
Yeah.
such a sad thing to see because at the end of the day, what matters is are you having the impact you want in the world with your career?
Yeah.
And are you feeling fulfilled by it? And so sometimes that means stepping sideways and
Yeah.
taking a lateral step that doesn't actually promote you because it sets you up for what you've decided you're excited to do.
Yeah.
And people, hesitate to do that because it doesn't feel like they're, keeping up with the Joneses, if you will, a very US
Yeah.
expression, but maybe it translates.
Yeah.
Um, so I think there's that, which is I think really important for people to recognize and reflect on, like what are you actually striving for? If it
Yeah.
is rapid acceleration, you're going to be making trade-offs. If you want balance, that's okay. There's nothing says you
Yeah.
have to move as quickly as everyone else or other people you look at want to.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. And recognizing that by learning new skills, by taking a side step, is just as valuable as moving up, especially when you get to leadership positions. Having the collective skills is often much needed if your aim is to work in a small biotech.
Exactly. And it's almost like going slow to go fast. It's something that our CSO
Yeah.
uses as a tagline a lot, which I really love. But in the career development context, it's true. You're
Yeah.
going a bit slower here, but the collective value of your learning will make you so much more successful at what you're doing that your ability to scale at that point will be higher should you so choose to.
Yeah.
But it's also okay for people to not have that ambition. As a
Yeah.
COO, people ask, when do you want to be a CEO? And my answer is, I don't know. Like I like what I do. I like the operations side. Like, could I aspire to be a CEO? I'm not sure yet. Like it's okay. Again, I'm not a planner. When it comes to
Yeah.
career, like I don't know that. I love what I'm doing and I want to keep doing this until there's a reason to do something different, right? And so I think it's a really healthy way to think about career and development.
Yeah.
But then also, people will tell you have to network. And
Mm.
MBAs, when I went to consulting, the networking that MBAs do was just like mind-boggling to me. And I sort of felt like I had to do it. But back to that, like there's what's natural to you and what's not.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is not natural to me. Having conversations with people just because I think they will be able to help me in the future is not how I'm built as a person.
Yeah.
It's just not my style. But there are people who I have conversations with who I genuinely like as people and respect the way they think. And so I've taken a good or bad, I don't know the answer, but my approach is much more targeted approach where I go out and I meet people and I go to the events that I should, but I don't try to, maintain this very cursory relationship with everyone.
Yeah.
There's a handful of people that I really enjoy and really connect with, and I sort of foster those relationships and prioritize those at the expense of, having breadth.
Yeah.
But the deeper relationships I found help me because those people have networks. And when I have a deep enough relationship and I go to them with an ask or a need, whether it's, you know, I'm looking for talent, help me find talent, or I have a question, I'm not quite sure where to turn. Those deep relationships, people will offer their network to you freely and willingly. You don't have to ask, versus those requests you get when someone's like, hey, I see you're connected to this person. Can you connect me? And it's like, I barely know you. No, I'm not going to connect
Yeah.
you to that person. No, because I barely know you, right?
Yeah.
So those are kind of the two things that I thought the most about that I sort of struggled to manage throughout my career as a new PhD scientist that I think would be helpful advice for my early self.
Yeah. Really valuable. What's next? What's next for Jen? I'm not going to ask you when you're going to be a CEO. And and what's next for Precede?
The Precede one, well, what's next for Jen is continuing to
Can I
build.
just say, I love the smile that comes on your face when we start talking about Precede. The passion just radiates from you.
I mean, it's such a fun place. What's next for Jen is Precede. Full stop.
Yeah.
No questions asked. We are building such an impactful technology that doesn't exist today that has such real impact for patients, and it's been incredible. I mean, the pace at which things run and operate is, very startup centric, exactly what you
Yeah.
would expect. Because there's such traction, right? Like we came out of stealth a little over a year ago, and in that time, the number of partners that have seen what our platform can do and who have told us like I can't get this anywhere else, right? Like it doesn't exist, is it just like speaks volumes to how important what we're doing is. And so
Yeah.
for me, this is doubling down on making sure that everything operationally at Proceed is ticked and tied and humming and getting to where we need it to be able to support the work that we know will actually create value for partners doing research and ultimately for patients in the clinic. um, yeah, maybe a little bit more fun in regulatory world. That feels like it's in the cards for me, whether I want to or not. But that'll be fun. That'll be
It's
really fun.
another string to add to the bow.
Yeah, exactly. That like going broad piece, right? Like
Yeah.
sometimes you pick up new depth. I mean, I've done a lot in this space in terms of like awareness and knowledge, but the technical components of it are going to start to pick up a bit more.
Yeah.
We'll have some folks there leading that charge, but yeah, it's a super fun place with again the team. I like team, and I think the reason my face lights up is I watch so many people talk about where they are, and like even the women that I was telling you I still mentor, like their frustration is with organization and politics in the organizations and
Mm,
like actually get stuff done, and we have none of that. We might have too
yeah.
much work on a given day, like most
Yep.
startups. Like not that. It's brilliant people who all are charging in the same direction and who listen to each other and want to do what's best and are happy to change direction, like no ego.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
really a fun place to be.
Yeah. And that ability to pivot and that ability to pull together, I'm sure will no doubt make you and the business a huge success and exciting
That's
times
the
for
goal.
next year. Yeah.
The path. That's the path we're on, which should be super fun.
Oh, really looking forward to seeing the achievements next year.
Well, thank you. We're excited to deliver them.